the advanced skills and techniques of communication. Leading this conversation right now today, we have the COO of Touchstone Publishers, Glenn Daniels. Welcome, Glenn.
Good morning, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Hunter Canning is a virtual event host at Power to Fly and will be hosting this conversation. So I'll pass the mic to both of you. Thank you for sharing your words today. I appreciate you all.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mariella.
And thank you for bringing up the sadness that's taking place in the world. We need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Mariella. And I think we could have a whole conversation on communication around that. And hopefully we can have Glenn back. Maybe we can talk about that in more depth as we dig into that here with that next event. Glenn, it's so good to see you. Thank you for being here. If you could tell us maybe a bit about yourself, your personal journey, before we jump into questions.
Well, myself is pretty short, sweet, and simple. I noticed this in my grandson the other day as well. We love to tell stories. I mean, from the very start, I remember being a person who wanted to tell stories, who wanted to entertain people. You know, for a while, I thought it was being a musician, which still is a little bit, but just the idea of educating through storytelling. So I actually officially got started in 1986, was it? 87, somewhere in that area. Just started building some chops, so to speak, working with Tony Robbins and the like, and eventually went out on my own and started developing my own work, my own understanding. It all comes from the understanding that I know nothing, but everybody else knows something. So that's how my career started to build. That's how it's at the point now where I can just sit back and kind of say, let me help if I can. That's me in a nutshell. Love to tell stories.
I love that. Sweet and simple, just like your grandson. That's adorable. How old's your grandson?
He is 4 now.
4. Oh, that's a fun age.
Oh, he really is a lot of fun, but he's also starting to pick up that little whiny stuff. But he's a lot of fun. So he's a blast.
Well, I'm sure he sees a role model in you for your communication skills. So first off, let's just jump in. And so why do you think that communication for professionals has become more difficult in the recent years? And do you think that?
In some avenues, yes. I don't think that as a whole, though. I think as a whole, the majority that are not being covered in the news, they look first to understand somebody. Those are being covered in the news, they don't care. That's just their viewpoint. And most of the time, if you really look at it, if you ask them, what's your evidence for that viewpoint? No, they can't give you any evidence. Like, what's your evidence that that person can't get the job done? It's just a feeling I have. Well, what documentation, what proof do you have? It's just a feeling I have. Those are the people who are catching the news headlines. And those are the folks who are giving the lack of management communication a good name. We have also changed the way we're doing business, though, and that may be some of it. Well, we haven't changed, but we've gotten more into it. Profit, quarterly, weekly, monthly profit has to be there. And that is oftentimes at the expense of the employee, oftentimes at the expense of the other department. And yet, if we took a few moments to kind of really dissect what great leadership is, you would know that you need that other department more than you need your department. You would communicate with them a little bit better. So some of that is getting lost, just the idea of we got to show our numbers today. We got to hit our KPIs today, no matter what that other department has to do. We don't care, just get our numbers. So I know that's kind of a if or kind of answer. But on the whole, I do believe that we are not lost in a lack of communication. We're just not, it just doesn't get covered. That's all.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier in your response there, you started talking about, these like gut feelings that people have. And we often talk about, professional environments is supposed to be a place of intellect more than our feelings, right? So, but why do you think that emotions and emotional intelligence are so essential to professional communication?
Well, the emotional intelligence, everybody seems to lose part of it. And that part that gets lost the most is the idea of that you need to see how you are affecting other people, not how you receive their message. What message are you giving to them? How does your message, how do you walk, how do you carry yourself, deliver that message? So when you miss that part, the ability to assess yourself, you don't do that. You're so busy assessing everything else. you don't assess yourself, that's where the emotional intelligence has to rise. That's where you can get the biggest growth. And so it's emotional intelligence when they sit down and assess themselves, plus number two, when they start to regulate themselves. When they start to regulate and say, okay, you know what? Body, you're not in control here. You may feel this way, but where the mind really is, where it truly is, you got to regulate that and kind of say, okay, I'm going to discipline my body. I remember this gentleman told me one day, he said, you know, you say you're going to get up and walk every day for an hour. 3 days in the process, you say, I don't feel like it. Well, self-regulation says it doesn't matter what I feel like. I'm going to go do it. Self-regulation says that when I'm working with an employee, my gut feeling may be this and it may be right, but I need to regulate and have documentation on it. Emotional intelligence kind of lifts that part up. And then when it comes to communication, my all-time favorite thing is you need to stop speaking in the way you want to hear it and speak in the way the other person needs to hear it. That's not being trained anymore, especially in leadership. What's being trained in leadership is the technical aspects of doing the job, not the communication aspect of it so much.
So when you're talking about training, can you walk me through, like when you're working with someone, what's a technique, an exercise? Is it written? Is it intellectual? Is it role play? Like, how does this work? How do you learn this?
Experiential learning. One example that I always use at the start of a class, I tell people, if you're ever in one of my classes, you know what I'm about to say. I tell you, don't bore me. Whatever you do, don't bore me. I know the person who paid me is cringing in the chair right now, saying, wait a minute, we paid you not to bore us. But I'm here to tell you, if you don't bore me, things will be fine. And the way you don't bore me is to get into this and practice it. And within 1 minute, I say, I'm bored. You guys are boring me. Everybody stand up. Half of you go to this side of the room, half of you go to that side of the room. And I said, get in groups of 4. And I said, decide who's going to be A, B, C, or D. And then based upon that decision process, we start talking about the assessment program. How did you decide who's going to be A? Did somebody in the group just say, hey, I'm going to be A because I'm the best? Did somebody in the group say, whatever everybody wants is fine? Did somebody in the group try to be super motivational? Did somebody in the group go, well, A, B, C, D, that's how we're standing, that's the way it should be? Those are the 4 communication types. That experiential learning right there locks that in for the rest of the day. So now you got to start to understand, okay, when I have to correct somebody, they're this type of personality, I need to speak that way. So we lay that out the first of the day in kind of a fun way. Everybody's laughing, they're enjoying it. But what I've noticed, to get back to the desk and start writing down, well, I did this, or, so-and-so does this. So it helps right away just to experience it. We experience body language signals. We experience body spacing. You just can't sit at the desk and talk about communication, because we don't talk about communication. Well, I'm sorry, when we communicate, we do not sit at a desk and communicate all that often.
Yes. I love that. It's on your feet, in action. It takes it out of the head and into the body, as you're talking about as well.
Yeah.
So what are some of the techniques to communicating when you're in this workplace environment, when people you're teaching are in these workplaces environment? Can you speak about in ways that what are the key techniques to communicating in ways that gets heard and also helps others know that they are being heard? Are there actual little things that we can do to do that?
There's the big picture, and then there are little things. But the big picture, let's start out there and let's give the proper credit. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. That book, if you take that book and put it inside the communication realm, it covers a lot of areas. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. It was written back in the 80s. But habit number 1, first things first. I'm sorry, that's habit number 2. Habit number 1 is know how you want it to come out. What is it going to be at the end? When I'm going to have a conversation, how do I want it to come out? I need to have that answer before I even begin the talk. If I'm going to sit down and discipline somebody, how do I want it to come out? Do I want it to come out where this person decides to leave the job? Or do I want it to come out where this person decides to improve himself on the job or herself on the job? How do you want it to come out? That's habit number 1. But habit number 5 is the habit that leaders need to lock on to, communicators need to lock on to. And that is seek first to understand, then to be understood. I want to know why you're coming to work late. I want to understand why you're coming to work late well before I start to tell you why you have to be here on time. If I understand it, then that's going to help me change and shape my perspective. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. I know of a young lady who was coming to work late 3 days of the week. And she was late the 3 days and then 2 days of the next week. First off, her manager, fortunately it wasn't me, decided to write her up about it and say, you got to get here on time, not realizing that she was getting abused at home. And that's why she was coming to work late. She had to take the extra time to get herself ready. So no one could tell that. Had he sought first to understand that, and because he didn't try to understand that, because he didn't put her in front of the employee assistance programs or in front of HR to help understand where she was coming from, they lost a perfectly good employee. You have to seek first to understand. Now, that's an extreme example that happens. But if I just have to say, you're not getting the report done on time, I need to understand that first. If you're not getting the report done on time just because you're lazy, and I understand that you don't care, I have a different outcome in mind. All managers, in order to have a great set of communication, is seek first to understand, then to be understood. The detail, the smaller piece of this, is if you decide that you want to be a great communicator, the first thing, the most important thing you have to do after you get the operating system of the 7 habits is stop talking. We as managers talk too much. Now I know as a trainer, consultant, whatever, I talk way too much. But that's also why I get people up and doing exercises and things in the classroom, because I need to stop talking. But as a manager with direct reports, you need to stop talking.
And then he stops talking. Perfect.
Yes. Yep.
So, yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. I mean, so you talked about, you mentioned HR in there. And so I love, seeking first to understand before being understood. And are there other communication skills, techniques that professionals can use to avoid conflict, and that, like you said, things can get rushed to HR maybe prematurely? Are there other ways that they can be handled through communication, through the employee, through the manager, through the workplace before it gets escalated?
Sure. And that the biggest way is to make sure that you understand what that person's going through or why they're not getting the job done. You have to understand that first. And then you have to be ready to frame your response in the language they need to hear it in. Now, for example, that person who just did that group of 4, there's always one person who said, well, I'm going to be A because I'm the best. I want to go first. You have to speak to that person differently than you talk to the person who says, hey, whatever everybody wants, that's fine. They have different languages, the same message, but different languages. If you cannot tell a person who's a real loyalist, who doesn't want to get anybody else's feelings hurt, you cannot speak to them the same way you speak to that person who's aggressive and strong and tough. You have to understand what that demanding commander wants, what's most important to them, and what's most important to that loyalist. The commander, they want to be on top. They want to protect themselves from getting hurt or being injured, so they're going to be standing strong and firm. The loyalist wants to avoid conflict. Those 2 areas, if you just understand just that by itself, you can start to frame your conversation to fit that. Well, that takes practice. Okay, if you're going to be a great leader, you got to practice. So let's practice it. Let's start practicing. That I call them the cheerleader, and that has kind of a bad connotation in it. But there have been more presidents of the United States that were cheerleaders, social media kind of people, than any other, because they motivate you. They'll get you all excited and get you ready to go vote for them. Well, that type of person in your office, if they're on your side, they can get the whole team. But if you have a meeting with them and you tell them the wrong way, and they get upset, they're going to leave your office and immediately try to get that entire team to turn against you. And they're going to motivate that team to get there. While then that last person, the analytical person, if you don't understand their language, that they need to have everything in logical order. You can't go A, B, E, F. You can't skip 2 steps. You just can't go A to Z. Here's what we're going to do and here's why. No, they got to have all the steps. So if you have to talk to them, you have to be aware of that. Small things that take a lot of practice, but it makes a huge difference when you start speaking that person's language that they need to hear, not what you're used to doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really fascinating and almost a little disturbing to hear how you're talking about rallying against someone on the team and to like create this united front. It can flip very quickly.
It can and it cannot. If you have been focused on every person or every individual in the group, it'll be really hard for that cheerleader to go out and turn the team against them. But why would you fight that uphill battle when all you have to do is speak their language?
I see. Yeah.
And just let them know, hey, okay, you're coming to work late. You've been coming to work late for the last 3 days. If I'm going to correct that person or work with that person, well, everybody's okay with me coming to work. That's what they say. Everybody, they like me. They'll protect me. They'll take care of me. John, I understand what you're saying there. And I have to let you know that you're creating more work for the team. If you want this team to stay on your side and still be with you and still be part of your tribe, you got to start getting into work because they don't want to keep on covering for you. John's going to far better understand that than me saying, get to work on time. No, I could have sworn I turned this all off, but get to work on time.
Yeah. So we're also getting some questions coming in from the audience. Please do feel free to keep them coming in. We're going to get to some of those. First off, we have, I'm going to pull one from this one. I think is anonymous. I don't have a name here, but it says, what is the difference between communication and advanced communication skills? Can you speak to that?
Communication skills would just be the ideal of, that's a good question. Advanced communication skills take you to the level of understanding how the mind works, what the body is saying on the inside. So understanding the meaning of what that person is saying. So you can understand what they're saying, right? But there's a meaning behind that. And their body language to give out some of that meaning. You have to pay attention to that. That's part of it. You have to pay attention to how you shape your words. The word but, for example, this goes in both areas, but if you say the word but, if I could get you to say the word but and see how it feels, but this, but that, you're a great employee, but, well, quickly, but's a trance-inducing word. People go inside their heads, automatically know you did not mean what you just said. Well, how do you take care of that? Well, advanced communication skills will sit down and teach you the trance-inducing word that you would need to use. And just for the record, that word is and. You're a great employee, and we need to have you improve this. You're a great employee, but we need to have you improve that. Which one feels better? Which one are you more willing to follow? The and. It takes practice to get there. Advanced communications involves that. Personal space, body space. Advanced communication makes you aware of when you are too close to somebody. You have to calibrate to that. Or when you are too far. You have to calibrate to that. When we're having meetings like this online, it's different, but you still got to calibrate to the response that people have. You have to calibrate yourself to learn different things. Like I have to calibrate myself not to look at your picture over here, but to look at the camera and just see a picture in that camera. You have to calibrate that. Those things take a little bit of experience. You have to understand in advanced communication skills when you're talking how to open up what I call loops and get them open so the person is wondering and then circle back to them. I'd like to know how you think you can improve this, but first thing, we need to improve this. What is your best plan to improve that? Okay, well, you've opened up a loop that you want them to improve it, and you ask them for the best plan. Now you can go back and loop to it and say, okay, either combine them or say, this is what we need for you to do. You have to, the nested loops, you have to be able to open those up. So there are several larger, smaller things, if you will. They're larger but smaller in advanced communications that you have to do. Framing your words so that they're almost hypnotic in nature. That people want to hear you. They want to follow you. Standard communication means following the 7 rules of, stop talking so much. Putting people at ease. If you just put in your mind, I'm going to put everybody at ease, that's great, but how do you do it? What advanced skills can you use to make it happen like that? I hope that
and there was a oh, go ahead, please.
No, I said I hope that answers. That's all.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I don't want to answer for you on this one. The follow-up question to that was, how do you develop advanced communication skills? First thing that came to my mind was take your class, but maybe you can speak more to how others can take and develop advanced communication skills.
Okay, so that's one. But you know what? I go back to a story of Beethoven. Beethoven wrote probably the world's greatest symphony. And 200 years ago, gosh darn, I know I turned off all these things. Turned 200 years ago, wrote the world's greatest symphony. And when he wrote it, he couldn't hear a single note of it. But he has one part in there that is extremely difficult for the orchestra to play. It's a 4 against 12 against 16 against 3 beats. Extremely difficult for the orchestra to play it. Very hard. And he told them when the head violinist came to him and said, "No, we'll never get this. It's too hard." He said, "Yes, you will. All you have to do is practice." There's a part in the symphony where he has the 4 soloists. One of the soloists, the soprano, is singing a note that up until that day had not been reached in a normal circus. It's such a high-pitched E that most singers could never get there. While at the same time, the bassist is going lower than normal. "We can't do it. We can't do it." He simply said, "Yes, you can. All we got to do is practice. You can handle advanced communication skills. All you got to do is practice." If you did nothing more than just practice, dropping the word "but" and saying the word "and just practice that, you're starting to get a hold of it.
You know, I love that you bring up the "and" and the "but," because that was a big shift for me. I learned that one a couple years ago, and I realized that, and something you were speaking to earlier, is the self-awareness of how often I was saying "but."
Yes.
And it was sometimes about other people, but I was often saying it about myself, like that negative self-talk. It was like, I did all this stuff, but I should be doing more. And then it was also showing up, if I was doing it to me, and I was doing it to other people as well. And it really is. It's amazing how one little word can completely shift a conversation and a train of thought.
Completely shifts it. And that is the key part of emotional intelligence, self-awareness. Are you aware of what you're doing to yourself? Like I always ask people, I said, "Are you aware that, did you have a glass of water this morning as you got out of bed, first thing, 4 to 8 ounces of water? Are you aware of how you feel differently when you do versus when you don't? Or your mind works different? Are you aware of that? So now that you're aware of that your mind's gonna work better and sharper, can you regulate yourself to make sure you have that glass of water? That's emotional intelligence. That's how you build those things in place.
We have a question from Teresa, asks, may we have an example of how to speak to each of the 4 communication types using the same situation for each type?
Sure. So let's start out with in the DISC assessment. By the way, in all these personality assessments program, they have different for everything. They have the horses, and they have animals, and they have colors, and they have letters, different things. So I kind of changed it a little bit and said, okay, that person who comes off as a commander. Think of someone who's in the service, they're a commander. Okay, let's say that you're going to talk to them about coming to work late. Okay, so we'll just use that as an example. Okay, I have to sit down with them and say, "John, we need for you to come to work on time. What can you do to get on time?" It's got to be point and flat to the point. And I have to ask them, what can you do to get here on time? I will add on, because your team relies on you, because they know you're perfect. They know you're great. So I got I'm gonna add on that stroke to them, because your team needs you here, because you're their leader. That commander, yes, sir, about time you got that right. You know, they're happy that you recognize the fact that the team looks at them as a leader. If you have that socializer, that cheerleader type of person, their biggest fear is that they're going to lose the team. Their friends are not going to like them anymore. So I got to say, "Bill, you got to get to work on time. What can you do to get to work on time? Because your team is relying upon you, and you don't want to lose your team." Okay, same results. Your team is relying upon you. You don't want to lose that team. So again, just go back to the commander. You got to let them know that you are acknowledging their brilliance. Okay, their leadership, they're all that. The cheerleader, you got to let them know that if they don't perform right, they're going to lose their team. If they want their team to really rally around them, What do you got to do to get to work on time? The loyalist, you have to get to them under the area of concern of them in conflict. Bill, no, we need for you to get to work on time because your team is creating conflicts when you're not here. What can you do to fix that? That loyalist will do anything to avoid conflict. So we've got those three examples. Then you got that person who is the analytical person. Sam, I got to get you to work on time because we need for you to do this, 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 and this. This is why we need you here on time. So you've laid out the logical steps that why they need to be here on time. Those are the four different examples. Just talking about being late, but paperwork, all that stuff. You can just, as long as you kind of know those four areas, you're in good shape.
We have so many great questions coming in here. Ashley, and we just have about a few minutes left. This is, I feel like we could probably spend the next half an hour talking on this one question. But if you could speak to, Ashley asks, can you talk about how code switching intersects with self-regulation for communication?
I'm not clear on code switching.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if code switching, I think to my understanding is when people are having to put on different, they're acting a different way in different circumstances. Okay. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm going to act more this way because I'm this way. And with these types of people, I'm going to act more this way.
Here's the thing about this. I had a CEO that was recently released from her position because she got stuck. She was a commander. She would never get off of it. She had a meeting with the founders. The founders told her, we have 15 minutes. 12 minutes in, the founder got back on the line and said, hey, listen, you've been talking for 12 minutes. I watched it this time. We only had 15 minutes. So don't you let anybody else talk? She goes, I had things to say, but now it's everybody else's turn. Well, that afternoon, she was looking for a new job. You cannot be stuck where you are. Flexibility is king here. You're going to code switch. That person is going to code switch, for lack of better terms, because of the situation they're in. And you, as the leader, have to be flexible and go with that. But remember, your predominant one is when you get tired. What do you do when you get tired? That's your predominant one. But we're all capable of being flexible. And so just put that in your mind. That person's capable of being flexible. Right now, they're being this. 2 hours from now, they're going to be this. And I got to hear their words and see how they're carrying their body so I can switch to that. By the way, that's part of the advanced communication skills. So you can see that they've made that switch and you can switch to that language where they are at that moment. Because all of us switch. You'll switch as soon as you get home.
Mm-hmm. You brought up, we just have a couple minutes left, and someone said a similar question. They said, Nilam, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, brought up at the end of the day, I'm just going to paraphrase a little bit. At the end of the day, I'm tired and I just feel like my brain is done, but I still need to communicate at work. How do you do that?
Drink your glass of water in the morning.
Simple as that. Yeah. There we go.
You're going to be tired, and that's just a fact.
Yeah.
But self-regulation will require that you realize that you're tired and you got to continue to do the right thing. Self-assessment says, I know I'm tired, but that's okay. What do I have to do to get there? Maybe enjoy my lunch a little bit more. What do I have to do to do those type of things? Yes, you're going to be tired. There's no ifs and buts about it. But as a leader, you still have to be flexible. Not an easy answer.
Not an easy answer. There's a lot to do. Well, Glenn, with this last minute here, as we're wrapping up, is there ways that our listeners can stay in communication with you? Is LinkedIn the way to do it? Your website? Anything exciting coming up that we'd like to know about?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the way to do it. I practically live on LinkedIn. So I would just, as Glenn Daniels, the number 2. So Glenn Daniels 2. And if you just go there and just say, hey, I have a question for you, I'll be more than happy to do that with you. But Glenn Daniels, the number 2 is my profile on LinkedIn. And like I said, I kind of really live there, kind of enjoy it there because I learn a lot.
Fantastic. Well, Glenn, thank you so much for the time today and this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm glad I got to share a little bit. It's so much fun to share.